Hey, and welcome back to the Art of a Life Well Lived. I am Christine Regan Lake, and it's good to be back here again. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, hope you're having a good holiday season. Just a few days left till New Year's Eve. So, heading into 2023, hoping you're going to get some clarity about what you want out of 2023. This is personally the week that I go through and write down everything that transpired this year, the good, the bad, the ugly, and really do an assessment of what I learned from this year and what I want to move forward into 2023, what I want different for my life in 2023, better, higher vibration, whatever, all those things. So anyway, let's get going. So today I want to talk to you 8 signs that you were raised by a narcissistic parent. So if you're watching this, more than likely, you personally have struggled with narcissistic issues throughout your life, meaning potentially narcissistic partners, things like that. So what specifically are some of the key signs to let you know that, yes, in fact, you did grow up in a narcissistic household? Me personally, I knew there was dysfunction, but until I started really deep diving on this topic of, narcissistic traits, narcissistic patterning several years ago, I had no idea what a narcissist was and things like that. So super important to understand your childhood, the dynamics, what influences you, things like that. So here are 8 common traits of people who were raised by narcissists. Well, the first thing is that many people struggle with paralyzing indecision and guilt, right? So more than likely, if you had a narcissistic mother or father, you were either guilted like relentlessly, where you were constantly made to feel guilty that you weren't doing enough, you weren't filling their own cup. You have to remember that a narcissist is like a drug addict, and their drug of choice is narcissistic supply. They need a constant and never-ending stream of love, affection, attention, and such. And they feed off of that energy. So if you don't give it to them, then they're going to start guilting you and blaming you. And then they'll even start to pick fights because they will take negative attention over no attention. So more than likely you were guilt tripped into infinitum. It was, everything was your fault. You were blamed for things like that. And you were also made to second guess yourself all the time, which is why you can struggle with paralyzing indecision. People can't make a decision about things. They have analysis paralysis. This is because when you were growing up, anytime you tried to exert your own will, your own decision, you would be met with a barrage of comments on why you couldn't do that, why that's a bad idea, things like that. So growing up in a narcissistic household can be very detrimental to your self-worth, your self-confidence, to know what is right for you, and cause eventually analysis paralysis or paralyzing indecision. So the next thing that happens is internalizing gaslighting, right? So they gaslight you so much it becomes internalized, right? So they start to make you question yourself. You start thinking you're going crazy because their gaslighting, their constant manipulation of the facts makes you come to really never really knowing, what is reality, right? So that you internalized that experience of being gaslit by your parents, and as such, it causes tremendous confusion, and you start to question your self-worth and things like that. The next trait is, if you were raised in a narcissistic household, you will become extremely loyal and defensive of that parent, right? So in a narcissistic household, there's dynamics, right? There is one parent will pit the kids against the other parent. They'll pit kid against kid. They're always looking to stir the pot, and they're always looking to get the most attention. So what happens is that when one child may start to question the dynamics of the parent, then that sibling will stay completely loyal to that parent, defending them no matter what. And they will ostracize that other child. They will side with the parent all the time. This is something called parental alienation. And so when a narcissistic parent pits the children against the other parent, that is narcissistic alienation. It is parental alienation. It is narcissistic manipulation. It is completely detrimental to the relationship between the children and the father, or the children and the mother, depending upon which is the narcissist. It is incredibly destructive to the child's self-worth and self-esteem, because whether you like it or not, that narcissistic parent, 50% of their blood and DNA runs through that child. And so when one parent demonizes the other parent, the child is demonized in the process. The child internalizes that and starts to believe that they are bad too. So what's the next sign that you might be a child of a narcissistic parent? Well, the fourth one is that you will become extremely strong and resilient because you've had to kind of live in survival mode since you were a child. It has forced you to figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet, how to be nimble, how to respond to challenges, how to, to just keep coming back after you hit after hit after hit. You just keep getting up no matter what. So you have tremendous strength and resilience to keep going in the face of adversity, in the face of, constant challenges and things like that. The fifth sign is that you have chronic self-blame, right? So the typical joke is, you walk into the room, I'm sorry, hi, I'm Christine, right? So it's constantly apologizing, assuming that everything is your fault. Because the reality is, if you grew up in an environment where whenever anything went wrong, regardless of whether you had anything to do with it or not, it was blamed on you, that's what happens. You start to internalize that, and you start to immediately think that whenever anything goes wrong, it must be your fault. And you're constantly apologizing for things that have nothing to do with you. You're taking blame for things that have nothing to do for you. So chronic self-blame is number 5. Okay, number 6 is you, as a whole, as a general principle, you tend to walk around on eggshells around people. You are very hypersensitive to the people in your environment, especially your parents. So you'll walk on eggshells with your parents, but you have become trained to do this, right? So you're constantly scanning the environment for picking up on subtle little cues about the people around you and learning that person, understanding, quickly assessing what it is that their triggers are, and then trying to walk and navigate around to make sure you don't, trigger anybody. So you are in a perpetual state of walking on eggshells, always in hypervigilant state, scanning the environment for anything that could go wrong, anyone who could become triggered, and trying to make sure that you alter your behavior, that you are making slight adjustments, and you are trying to do everything in your power to make sure this person isn't triggered, which it's unsustainable. It's not healthy. Nobody else's triggers are your fault. So we have to learn to let go of that hypervigilance. One of the ways you can do that is through different practices that you can embrace to turn off your sympathetic nervous system. You can do a near-infrared sauna, you could meditate, you could go for a walk in nature, but that hypervigilant state that keeps you walking on eggshells is highly destructive to your emotional, physical, and spiritual body, your mental body, and you really have to learn how to rein that in and bring it under control, and to learn to stop walking on eggshells. And if this means that you have to distance yourself from various narcissistic people, then that's what you need to do. You have to embrace those self-care techniques. Okay, number 7, you have an insecure attachment style, which means that you could be an avoidant attachment, or you could be an anxious attachment, which is basically whether it's in your friendship relationships, family members, or specifically a lover. You will have an unhealthy relationship with that person where you can become very anxious that they're going to leave you, abandonment issues, or you could be an avoidance style where you immediately pull back and you have commitment issues and things like that. So you have an insecure attachment because you grew up in an unstable, unhealthy, dysfunctional environment in which you never knew when the SHIT was going to hit the fan, when you could be in trouble, when you could be blamed, when you could be gaslit and things like that. So because you grew up in such an unstable, unsteady environment, your existence became questionable, right? It was always this kind of unknown variable of what's going to happen today. I remember personally that when by the time I got a car, as soon as I would turn up onto my street when I used to live with my parents, obviously, when I was, in my teenage, years, things like that. When I would turn up on the road, I would immediately get a stomach ache because I never knew what kind of storm I was going to walk into. And ultimately, I always knew I would be blamed for it anyway. So it was kind of this perpetual state of hypervigilance. And so that causes that insecure attachment. It could either be an anxious attachment, it could be an avoidant attachment, things like that. So you might want to explore those attachment styles to see which one you are most affected by, which one resonates for you, looking at based upon the behavior and how you operate in relationships. And the last one, the 8th sign, is that it's super clear that the entire world revolves around that parent, right? So, typically that parent who's a narcissistic parent holidays are usually an SHIT show. Crazy, fights, everything has to be perfect. Their holidays are highly triggering for a narcissistic parent. And so typically there will be fights, there will be total chaos on holidays. Everybody knows it. It's kind of a known entity in the family. But everything revolves around the narcissist, catering to that person, everyone fluttering around them, making sure like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? Things like that. So those are the 8 common traits that you have been potentially raised by a narcissistic parent, and I'll just summarize them again. The first is paralyzing indecision and guilt. After being guilted for years upon years upon years by your parent that, you're not good enough, whatever, everything's your fault, it makes you question your own judgment. It makes you question your own self-confidence. And so you can become paralyzed with analysis paralysis. You can't make decisions and you are guilt-ridden. The second thing is that you internalize the gaslighting that has been done to you by that parent, where they're constantly making you feel like you're crazy, they lie, they manipulate, and things like that. You internalize that, and then you embody that as you're going about your day, questioning yourself, thinking you're crazy, things like that. The third one is that you'll stay loyal to the narcissistic parent no matter what. Even when the parent is wrong, you will defend them against other, from when siblings are raising questions or things like that. The fourth one is you develop incredible strength and resilience from having to becoming parenticized, meaning that you had to become a parent as a child. You actually had to parent your parent when you were a child, which forces you to learn to be independent, stand on your own 2 feet, be strong, bounce back from whatever challenges are thrown at you. The next one is you have chronic self-blame, where you're apologizing nonstop for things that have nothing to do with you, that are not your fault. It's because after being in an environment where everything was blamed on you, even when it had nothing to do with you, you internalize that, you assume everything is your fault, and you're constantly apologizing to people for it. The 6th one is walking on eggshells. You're in a constant state of hypervigilance, always assessing the environment, trying to make sure you don't trigger anybody. The 7th is an insecure attachment style, which could either be an avoidant or an attachment avoidant, or an anxious attachment, meaning that you have big abandonment issues, and how you respond to them is either avoidant or anxious, depending upon the environment in which you grew up with and the coping mechanism that you embraced. And the last one is that the entire world revolves around the narcissist. Holidays are a complete nightmare. They have to be the center of attention. It's a highly triggering experience for them for holidays, which tends to be major fights, screaming, chaos, dysfunction, things like that. So those are the 8 traits that you may have been raised by a narcissistic parent. Understanding the dynamics of a narcissistic family, how the narcissist brings in the flying monkeys, how they use triangulation, how they use gaslighting. These are super important for you to understand about your family dynamic, how you were raised, and where you fall in the pecking order of that narcissistic family. So I hope you found value in that. I truly love sharing these messages with you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop me a note, comment in the description box. I love connecting with you, hearing your thoughts, the stories that you share about what's going on with you. It's about building a community here so that we can all rise together and co-create our best lives ever. So I hope you have a beautiful day, the happiest of New Year's, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.